Anta Whitner, Beth Kraft, Dr. Adrian Carter. I have Kadia Ross, Martin Moore, Sergio Fernandez. I believe it's Ty from Pivot Point. Vanessa. I got DK. Virginia, we just said that you were here. And Eric Robinson. Is anyone else that's on Zoom that I didn't say your name?
We have a few more guests. I see Kim Robinson with Asheville City Schools, Joe Jamison with United Way, and Ricky LeBrun with CDG. I'm not sure.
Hey, Hannah, that's the Carter group as well, the RLR.
Great.
Or no, Ricky, that's right there. So if you wanna, you promoted some people, but not.
Besides those that are on Zoom, people we have present here, Hannah, myself, we have Judge Dotson Smith, Craig Loveland is out there getting some food, Sylvia Clement, Angela Garner, Jeremy Bricker, your name? Riley Ober. And down here, what is it? Just one in there? I feel like a computer or something over there.
Ava Vaughn with clinical program.
Okay.
I believe also getting food.
Okay.
Good afternoon, I'm Terry Bell. I work with the
Oh.
Business Services Department as well as Equity and Human Rights.
Miss Bellamy. I was like, wait a minute. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Juan Holiday, Welcome Alternatives, Learn and Learn.
Gotcha. So I feel like we got a lock on the roll call. Again, if somehow you haven't heard your name at this point, what we'll do is continue to see who comes in and out on Zoom, or if anyone steps in person. At this point, I think we can go ahead and kind of get to the introduction of the presenter. Lorraine, if you're ready, I'll hand it off to you.
That's good. Thank you, Jordan. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Redmond. I'd like to present our speaker today, Ms. Crystal Wynn Lewis. Ms. Lewis is our Racial and Ethnic Disparities Coordinator for North Carolina Department of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. Ms. Wynn Lewis has nearly 30 years of experience working with juvenile justice. She began her career in corrections a number of years ago and has shown a lot of leadership in her time with juvenile justice. She's mostly worked as directors of facilities management, including at AC Dillon and another center that we have here in North Carolina, as well as in juvenile justice in Virginia prior to that. In her current role as Racial and Ethnic Disparities Coordinator, she's here to share some data with us about racial and ethnic disparities and how to look at that and interpret that type of data, and to look at some of our key pieces here in Buncombe County. We just have data for this past year and it's fairly new. And so Ms. Lewis is going to take us through that to help us make better decisions and look at it and think about different access points within the community and in juvenile justice, how we can continue to improve access for all of our youth. So thank you so much. for coming, Crystal, and for sharing with us today.
You there, Crystal?
We can hear you, Crystal, but it's very broken up.
I feel like we're in a Verizon commercial. Can you hear me?
Crystal, there should be an audio or a phone for audio if we need to do that.
Mute her microphone and call in. She still needs to stay on the computer to run.
Right.
Could she send it to you, Hannah?
Yeah.
I have not gotten it yet, no.
Maybe just a thought, she could send it to you and just back out of some call.
She has all the permissions to screen share, but we're not seeing.
So is it thought for her to mute herself on her computer, but then just call in and then just use the computer as the presentation, continue to show? Crystal, if you can hear us, we've come up with maybe an option. I believe it's the computer you're on, if you can mute yourself. And then there should also be a phone number attached with the sort of Zoom link. Maybe you can call in and we can hear you through your phone, and then we can also just present on your laptop as to the data that you're going to talk about.
So we're also having trouble seeing your slides. If you're able to share them with me, then I could, this is Hannah speaking, then I can. I could share them on the Zoom.
She's talking to Lorraine right now, so she probably has a few too many chefs up there.
Yeah. Oh, Mr. Dennis, how you doing?
George, I believe that Blythe McCoy has also joined virtually.
Let's make it easier on me, please go ahead.
Technical difficulties.
Hannah. Over here. Is she mainly going over like these kind of things that were on the dashboard, or is it different?
No, she's got data
Have
directly
you looked
from,
at these?
what's that?
The dashboard summary numbers that are there?
Yeah, those are through North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, the report cards for the
Yeah.
schools. Yeah, no, this is more, I think she's got data from the school-based referrals as a whole.
So long-term SJP link, this deals with the
I think the
absenteeism.
two sides,
And
there's just not
really interesting in the difference
nonsense. System changed it.
in a way that I don't think we necessarily have addressed.
I was thinking it'd be good to talk through what exactly
Yeah.
you want the written request to be, because it's verbally
They're all trying to talk.
high level, but
Right, understood.
There's an issue.
I was gonna give copies of these two with hard copy over to Chief, just because I think he sometimes works that way.
David.
You back, Crystal, you here?
I'm here, I'm trying to share my screen.
hi, Crystal, we can hear you and see you.
Okay, good, I'm glad he's involved.
Okay, well, that's not what I was.
It's like no one can actually tell me.
Maybe you can probably allow me to share.
No one can actually point to anything.
How's the staffing?
Crystal, you may need to call in because you're still breaking up.
If there's even.
Right.
We're supposed to do an accounting error too. Private some piece. And we're serving moms through the door. But I don't
I'm going to be really aggressive on your students in terms of I composed. He's got.
Yeah.
So we're working through, you're about to get 2 more. Are. Okay. My voice. So you. Been filing out. So have this long time. The other training. I could be wrong.
You signed me.
Thank you.
So
I don't actually have the resources. So that's why I have a choice. He's been pretty good. To start cleaning. You know, he's the one. So it's not all you, it's all we going to do. And I say, no, that I work hard. Utilize. Much.
No, that's.
Yeah.
Like I'm.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like it's hard to hit a target if there's.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm gonna meet.
Feel like as long as you're doing it.
I'm gonna meet. But you can't share.
Then to help me.
That would be the fastest option. Yeah.
It's like she left.
Crystal left.
I think she might be trying to rejoin.
Happy to help.
Blythe said the audio actually works well with the phone, not working with Zoom, and Amy said she could see Crystal now, but can't hear you.
Yes.
Over y'all.
Two holes, so.
Yeah.
I guess this is
Um,
half in here, but I guess,
Yeah. So. Disagree from my perspective. I'm glad y'all feel good. I'm gonna do a good job, but glad y'all filled it for me. It's like that's. Not even like.
You'll have some other stuff or you might.
you've been loving it.
Yeah.
Work there.
Right.
I
mean, Monday's normally work.
I mean, we have issues here.
Safer school.
I was about to ask you, boots on the ground, how's it looking in the city?
Yeah.
School-wise?
It's because you're not.
You know, it's interesting, I just had,
Just.
Sylvia, I just
And that is connected down there to like.
Yeah,
You're all
it's
about
absolutely,
it,
you know.
and although.
I mean, we've worked through it, but
Whatever.
sometimes it is a lot.
Still don't get you know, it's not just us.
Really,
That's the only way that's.
Right, y'all were just saying petition was the only thing you got is in your arsenal.
Right, I mean.
I feel like-
Hi, everyone on Zoom. Apologies for the technical difficulties. We are really grateful for Dr. Crystal Winlow's coming to be with us, and unfortunately, had to switch to virtual, so we are trying to adapt. And we will be with you as soon as we are able. Thank you.
Yeah.
Susan had to be in the.
Okay.
I can feel it.
varying the gamut of.
So much so.
Yeah, you know,
Yeah, it's really conduct.
It's a
Cardio.
Yeah.
You know, like an cardio used to be.
Yeah, if I'm gonna get you on there.
Crystal, are you able to hear us?
Right now.
Mhm.
You know, the actual city schools, they're going to team, but they gotta. So we don't see
The
it.
more you sit on it, the more
And so, as a matter of fact, that was part of the conversation.
the option that it allows people to be present that can't be, but then you also run the. God, we had this issue and it's like somehow our arraignment, when first appearances are happening, the judge can see the individual to the others. But the individual in the video, so they can't see the judge. They can hear the judge, but can't see him. And so this big article came out about how somehow we were violating their rights, although the judges would always ask, are you okay with this process? If not, you can always come over and we can do it that way. And they got on the solve them, fine, which is good. How we do it, you know, but might have been safe.
I've seen that.
Correct, correct. Yeah.
Check behind and see what happens.
I always find something else to do in a situation like this.
We do that annually every year.
Always.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey.
To the SROs.
You guys are killing it over there, killing it.
Yes, problem solvers.
Yes.
Thank
See, Brandon, you were on Zoom and then you.
No, I've been in business since like 10:30. Oh, man.
Now you eat tacos, you're in it.
I don't think there's anything worse than being at the dentist. I'm gonna be completely honest. I gotta go back.
Yeah.
Just the smell of it. I mean, it just has that smell associated with it. It's like a gummy fluoride or whatever.
Can we hope some better smell? They did this thing where I had to walk in and bite on it and this thing went around.
Digital imprint of where your teeth.
Yeah. It's like, they showed me like a 3D image of my skull.
Tiffany, can you unmute and make sure that we can hear you?
me?
Say
Yeah,
hello.
we can hear everybody. Crystal, we can hear you. And we can hear you. You ready?
It was just weird, I've never seen that.
Are we
Thank
good?
you everyone so much for your patience. I believe that we are ready to go.
Crystal, can we hear you?
I'm not sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. And we can see your slides as well. So it looks like we are at green light. Thank you all behind the scenes for being able to get this problem resolved. This time, Crystal, feel free to take it away.
Okay. All right, thank you. And I do apologize for the technical difficulties and we got to figure out what's going on with it, but I think it's our connection. So good morning, everyone. My name is Crystal Wynn Lewis. I am the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Coordinator for Juvenile Justice. Unfortunately, because we wasted a little bit of time trying to get set up, I'm going to move a little faster than intended, but I do want to go over why we do racial and ethnic disparities in juvenile justice. Next slide, please. So racial and ethnic disparities as defined by the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act, JJDPA, is minority youth populations are involved at decision points in the juvenile justice system at disproportionately higher rates than non-minority youth at the same decision point. This is the exact language from 34 USC 11103. Next slide, please. The JJDPA, which is the first comprehensive juvenile legislation passed by Congress in 1974. It's a voluntary participation, but North Carolina is a participant in the JJDPA, and there's 4 core protections. As a member of, as a state that complies with JJDPA, we have to meet certain conditions. And those certain conditions, there's like 33 of them, but the 4 core that are mandatory, or your Title II funding is lost or decreased, are the deinstitutionalization of status offenders, sight and sound separation, adult jail and lockup removal, and racial and ethnic disparities. The first one, status offenders should not be locked up in any detention center or jail. Those are those runaways, truancy, not going to school, those type of offenses. The second and third, sight and sound separation, adult jail and lockup removal. Simply put, there should be no child housed or in sight and sound distance of an adult inmate that's incarcerated. Racial and ethnic disparities is the last one. It was made a core in 1988. It used to be called disproportionate minority contact, or DMC. And in 2018, with the reauthorization, it changed to racial and ethnic disparities. Next slide. And that's going to be the focus. Next slide. So we're going to talk about compliance of the red core requirement. Next slide.
Crystal, I'm sorry, we lost your sound when we switched to the state compliance slide.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, state compliance. For state compliance for Title II funding, we have to identify and reduce racial and ethnic disparities. When we got the reauthorization in 2018, they added the language that we actually had to reduce. In the past with DMC, we only had to identify points of contact and report the data. Now we're required to actually reduce it by a certain percentage. We have to develop a red plan and do an evaluation every 5 years of our racial and ethnic disparities across the state. We're also required to collect data on the contact points, which is what we're going to be covering for the remainder of the slides. The Governor's Crime Commission has a designated group, the JCPC, the Juvenile Justice Planning Committee. They are the state agency that monitors for compliance. Failure to comply with most of the components, but the mandatories, does result in us not receiving Title II grant funding, which a lot of our communities across the state depend on for programs for kids. So that is why we do racial and ethnic disparities. In addition to it being the right thing to do, we also are a participant in the JJDPA. Next slide. So now we're going to look at the compliance data. We're going to start out with the state data, and then we'll go into Buncombe County specifically for fiscal year 22-23. We collect data that we have to report annually on a fiscal basis. That's July 1st through June 30th of every year. Next slide. So prior to 2018, we used to have to collect data on 9 decision points. We still collect that data, but what we report to the federal government is just the 5 contact points, which are arrest, complaint data, those cases that are diverted, not approved, kids we place in detention, and YDC placements, and kids that are transferred to adult court. Under the last administration, they discontinued using the relative rate index, better known as the RRI. Our last administration wanted whole numbers and percentages being reported. We still collect the RRI, but that's just one measure to tell part of the story. So we still provide that, but we also encourage people to dig deeper when they get the RRI, because sometimes it takes on a meaning of its own, which really may not be the case. Next slide. Are we looking at the population slide? I'm sorry.
Yes.
So the population data is from 2020 census. That's the last published census report for the United States for kids 6 through 17. North Carolina has a little over 1.5 million youth ages 6 through 17. The breakdown are as follows. White youth represent 54% of that population. Black youth, 24% of that population. Hispanic, 17%. Asian, 4%. Native American, 1%. Next slide. This past fiscal year, we had over 37,000 complaints filed. That includes status complaints, status infractions. We'll talk about delinquent in just a second, but the total complaints that were filed in court services across the state were 37,017. However, when we talk about the kids that were involved in those complaints, that was only 15,355 kids involved. Next slide. Of the delinquent complaints received, we received 35,369 across the state. And those are delinquent complaints that involved 15,355 kids. Now, the breakdown of those complaints, almost 60% were on Black youth, 25% white youth, 10% Hispanic, other races combined, 5%. When we talk about disparities, this is what disparities looks like. When you have a population that's 24% and almost 60% of the complaints that come through. When we talk about the relative rate index, for youth of color compared to white youth, they're 3 times more likely to receive a complaint. We also zone in on the Black RRI, since that is the highest disproportionate group in the juvenile justice system. And the Black RRI statewide is 5.16, which means that Black youth are 5 times more likely to receive a complaint than their white counterpart. Now, briefly, when we talk about the RRI, proportionality is a value of 1. Anything above 1 is disproportionality, except in 2 areas. That's not approved complaints and cases disposed. But anything above 1 is disproportionality. The RRI also is only one way to look at causal factors. What has to happen is a formal assessment should be done along with the quantitative research, because it only tells you to what extent, but you have to do surveys, interviews, and additional research. One of the reasons why they stopped utilizing the RRI is because people were taking that RRI and stopping there and not digging deeper. So the last administration went strictly to percentages and whole numbers. Next slide, please. When we look at the cases that were not diverted statewide, almost 40% of the cases were either not approved or diverted. Of the complaints that white youth received, almost 50% of their complaints, 49%, were not approved or diverted. For Black youth, who had almost 60% of the total complaints, had 35% of their total not approved. Hispanics, 37% of their complaints not approved. Next slide, please.